Hello, YouTube. This is Mahadeva, the ThunderWizard. This is again the Answering Your Questions series. So, I got a question from somebody which I thought was worth responding to. The person asks me, what is the difference between codependency and, quote, teamwork, unquote? And my response to that is please explain how you use teamwork in your own life. Also, tell me why you're confused about these two concepts. So, I ask these kinds of questions because, you know, if I get the sense that there's something underneath the question that people have a personal need, it always helps me when you share with me what your need is. Because I can usually tell when a question is something that has to do with something in your life that have a strong connection with, you're struggling with. And so when you share with me the emotional need behind it, it then makes it a lot easier for me to pinpoint how I can best help you. Because just asking general questions lots of times doesn't really solve the real reason behind the question. So I felt that in this question that there was more to it. So I wanted her to share with me the teamwork that she does, the kind of relationship that she has. Is this something having to do with a personal relationship, family relationship? And then why you're confused about these two concepts. So before we get into it, let me tell you what codependence is, and then you can answer the question which I put up in the title, which is, do we live in a chronically codependent world? So codependence is very easily sometimes masked. I mean, the truth is, codependence is huge. And codependence means that you have an external locus of control. It's a fancy way of saying you relate to the world based on how other things and other people make you feel. So somebody can be codependent and be extremely friendly and extremely giving, but they can be very codependent. Also, somebody can be very selfish and very abusive and be very codependent. Bottom line is that codependence is when somebody responds to the world from an external locus of control. You have power to make me feel a certain way. What you say, what you do, what you give to me, those will determine how I feel about myself and how I feel in general. So we're all affected by outside stimuli, but somebody who's not codependent, by the way, everybody has some level of codependence, so it's not a perfectionist thing, but somebody who's not codependent, they may be hurt, they may be upset, they may be disappointed, they might be angry about something that happens, they might be sad, but they have the ability to self-heal, to self-soothe, to self-parent, which means they're individuated. They have an internal locus of control. So that means, again, we're not talking about people who deny, because a lot of codependent people will deny their feelings and say, nothing bothers me, I'm okay by myself. And in reality, that's just their insecurity, and they, want to look good or they don't want to get hurt, so they pretend. They put up this false armor of everything's okay, when in reality, they're deeply saddened, in pain, angered, whatever. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about somebody who actually is self-individuated. When somebody does legitimately hurt them, or when they want something and they get disappointed, anything like that, then they have the feelings, the pain everybody feels, but then they're able to go inward and go, you know what? That's not me, that's them. I know who I am. They have this ability to love themselves. So codependent people don't have that ability. They don't have the ability to self-parent, to self-individuate. They are completely dependent on what the outside world does in order to give them validation to feel relevant in the world, to feel loved, all of that. So how does somebody become codependent? Well, the way somebody becomes codependent is that at some point in their upbringing, they were given the message, either outright or energetically or through experience, that their value came from what they do, their performance. And so then that's how they become focused on having an external locus of control. Because if your value comes from what you do for other people, then that means that you, in and of yourself, have no value. In other words, you don't have value simply because you exist. And I'm reminded of a near-death experience that a woman had. You may have heard me share about this, but it's really profound. A woman was dying of cancer. She was in the hospital. Her body was riddled with cancer, and they were just waiting for her to die. And she was in a coma, and she did. She slipped out of her body she died, left her body. And the moment that she was outside of her body, she was surrounded with this love. There wasn't any being or anything. She was in a beautiful place and surrounded by this feeling of total, complete love and acceptance. And she became aware that, oh, I have value. I'm lovable simply because I exist. I don't need to do anything to get it. And this whole time I was in the body, I thought that I had value based on what I did for other people or what other people thought of me. And that's where her cancer came from. And so she had that awareness that I have value simply because I exist, and I deserve to be loved simply because I exist and for no other reason. And with that knowledge, she was sent back into her body, and she knew that she was going to heal. And the doctors were all amazed that in fact her cancer started shrinking and she healed. And it was because, she had that experience. Now, not all of us are that lucky. Unfortunately, the vast majority of us have to actually work through this stuff. And, without that kind of near-death experience, it's kind of hard to have that assuredness. We have to have faith and work towards it. But that's a really good example. The difference between being codependent and being self-individuated. That you know your worth because you know that your worth comes from nothing else other than you exist. And so anything else that happens outside of you doesn't reflect on you. It doesn't mean that you're not responsible for how you act to others, or that you're not here to be helpful to others and loving and all that. It just means that other people's responses, other people's internal problems with themselves is not your problem. It's okay that they have negative feelings. So codependent people, as I said, you can be a full-blown sociopathic narcissist. They are also codependent because they live to look good in front of other people. They also project their feeling of worthlessness onto others when they see other people simply as objects to be used for their own pleasure. That means they experienced that. They experienced, at the very least, had the feeling that they were simply a prop for somebody else's amusement, and therefore they project that onto other people. They don't have any empathy because they don't have any self-empathy. Those are the extreme and the abusive narcissist. But you also see this with the so-called empath, the super empath. And the super empath is codependent as well. Whereas the narcissist gets their value based on convincing you that they're perfect, or trying to bully you and control you so that you see them as perfect or all-powerful. They still have that. They're completely dependent on your reaction to them to have any feeling of self-worth. The other side, the empath, who is also a codependent, They get their worth on helping others, healing others, taking care of others. And it's not coming from a selfless place, although they may feel, because they call themselves empaths, meaning that I feel so much for other people. But that is the same as the narcissist. The narcissist projects his feeling of worthlessness by seeing other people simply as objects, because that's how he was treated, and that's how he feels about himself. The empath, on the other hand, they were told somewhere in their upbringing that their value came from fixing other people, making other people happy. And so if you have, let's say, a girl and her mom is constantly depressed and abusive, and so she had to always make sure that mommy was happy, that mommy felt okay. She got the feeling she wouldn't have any worth unless she made sure that she made mommy happy, because mommy didn't have the ability to make herself happy, didn't have any self-worth. So the child got their identity and their self-worth based on what they do for others. And this is the opposite of the narcissist. You'll see somebody going around constantly living for other people. They are always giving to other people. They get into relationships with very needy people who they constantly have to be fixing. When they're by themselves and they don't have somebody to fix, they have a lot of anxiety. Because their worth comes completely from helping others, healing others, fixing others. So you have a lot of people who end up in the nursing industry, other kinds of places like that. You'll find a lot of codependence in those practices, as well as very loving, healing, nurturing people. But what ends up happening with the empath is that the empath, again, needs to be validated from other people. They need other people to think that you are so empathic and you're so loving, and they need that constant to be told. I'll give you an example of a very typical codependent, an empath codependent phrase, which is, I don't ask for much. You hear this from codependents who get their value based on fixing other people, making other people feel better. So for instance, a codependent, an empath codependent, if you're around them, they will be very uncomfortable around people who are sad or who are upset. To give you an example, when my fiance passed away, her friends asked me to come and be part of there was just an impromptu gathering where they were going to remember her. So we went down to the beach and we had a little bit of a memorial, which was really just us getting together, talking about her and how much we cared about her, etc. And they asked me to talk, and of course she was my fiance, so I had a lot of feelings. And so I was sharing my feelings, and of course some feelings came up, and I was choking back the tears. And this woman said, out of nowhere, said, hey, it's okay. You don't have to be upset. Look at how beautiful the beach is today. Look at that. She wouldn't want you to be upset. Stop being so upset. She was really uncomfortable because I was having feelings. Now, it wasn't the appropriate place. Normally I would have said, hey, look, don't tell me how to feel. I have the right to have this feeling. Stop. I'm sorry that you don't like your pain, but it's not your job to fix me and talk me out of my feelings. So you'll find this with people. The empaths will say when they go into the room that they can feel the person who's upset, and they're drawn to the upset person. If they walk down the street, they're drawn to the homeless person. And they'll even say, they'll use their narcissism and their feelings of superiority, because codependents usually feel superior to other people. That's actually their projection of their insecurity. But the empath will say, somebody who's not an empath, they won't feel as deeply for the homeless person as I do. And so they judge people for not having the intensity of feeling. But the truth is that that's a projection as well. So they're constantly going and nurturing and taking care of everybody who is in pain or everybody who's got a problem. And that's because that's what they unconsciously want somebody to do for them. They want somebody to scoop them up and to make them feel loved simply because they exist. Now, they actually, if you gave that to a codependent, it would make them very uncomfortable, because then they wouldn't have anything to do to get worth, because their worth comes from helping others. And that's comes down to, again, people are just pawns in their game, that they just want to be seen and loved for what they do, not for who they are. So if you don't have problems, you're of no use to them. If you're self-empowered and you don't need any nurturing or love, then you're going to be less likely to demand that of them, which means that they won't feel useful around you. So now let's get back to her question. Now that I've explained to you, basically codependence is a transactional relationship. If you're a codependent person, it means that your worth is either because you have to provide a transaction for somebody else in order to get their approval, or you demand that other people do something for you in order for you to acknowledge them. It's a transactional relationship, whereas somebody who is not codependent doesn't have a transactional relationship. They accept you and they love you simply because you exist. And they love and accept themselves simply because they exist. So they can be happy with themselves, whether they're with somebody or whether they're by themselves, because they're individuated. All right, so let's get back to the question here. So she says, what is the difference between codependency and teamwork? And I asked, trying to get her to share more of her emotional connection so I could figure out what was going on, because the truth is, people who normally ask that question are usually people who are struggling with codependence. So that was my feeling. The more information I knew about her, I could figure out whether or not that was the case. I couldn't tell from that question. So she obliged and responded, because I asked her, please explain how you use teamwork in your life. Also tell me why you're confused about these two concepts. So she says, in my life experience, the meaning of teamwork is achieving a common goal between two or more people. Commitment, loyalty, strength, trust, patience, understanding, compassion, forgiveness, responsibility are the few recipes that come to my mind. Now, that didn't answer my question. My question was, I wanted to know specifically in her life. She had said, well, my husband and I, my kids and I, at work, she didn't reveal what I wanted, which is I wanted to know what her relationships were like, because that was the feeling I get is that she's struggling with codependence, trying to figure out if she is codependent or not. And I wanted to know, what does that mean? So what she just said is obvious, but the thing is, whether you're codependent or not, those values, because they're very general values, are going to apply. So the codependent person who goes around fixing everybody, they see themselves as a team player, and they may very well be a team player. Usually they're very able to be good team members, and they feel good in a group, and they feel good working and helping, commitment, trust, patience, compassion, forgiveness, all these other things. This is teamwork. They are naturally that way, as well as if they're codependent, then they also have a transactional relationship where for them the teamwork is the place within which they can fix other people and be a really good team worker, a really good helper, and that's where they get their value. And so it can be, then they end up giving too much all the time because they're desperate for people's love and approval. So that doesn't tell me what I want to know, because that could be anybody. And then, of course, I asked her two questions. I said, what is teamwork in your own life? And then the second question was, why are you confused about these two? She didn't answer the second question. She didn't even try to address it. She said, overall, I thought it was a good question to ask. Now I have to say, this next part sounds codependent. Now that I've explained codependence to you, listen to the next part. She says, you never know who is listening and how a question helps others. So this is a very codependent, now I'm not saying she is, but it is a very codependent thing to divert people from your own needs by making it about others. So she's making it sound like, I was thinking about how other people need to think about codependence and how other people would learn if we asked about this, instead of why she wanted to know, why she was confused. She wasn't, this again, codependence, again, on one extreme you have the narcissist who says, I don't need anything or anybody, but they obviously do because they use everybody and their value comes from using people. The empath, on the other hand, also says, I don't have any needs, I'm perfect, I'm just here to help others. But what they really want is the acknowledgement of, oh my God, you're such a great person. Oh my God, you're so lovable. Oh my God, you're so this and that. You're so dependable. But they just give and give and give, and then they never get anything back. And it's really destructive for them. So the thing about the empath, as I said, the very common empath phrase is, I don't ask for much. So you hear this, and I've given this example before, but it works. So there's a PTA meeting, right? And you've got Mrs. Jones. And Mrs. Jones shows up to the PTA meeting and she brings cookies. So she brings a plate of store-bought cookies and she sets them down and everybody's talking and they're grabbing the cookies and eating them and they walk out and nobody says anything. Nobody says, thank you for the cookies. Nobody even says, who brought the cookies? Nobody says, hey, and I just want to point out that Mrs. Jones brought the cookies tonight. Nobody says anything. And she's hurt by that. She doesn't want to be hurt by that. She feels guilty. And so she goes home. But next week, the meeting rolls around. And so this time, she goes to the bakery and gets really good cookies coming straight from the bakery. They're chewy and they're really wonderful. And of course, they taste better. And so she comes and she shows up early and stands in front of the plate and puts the plate down and watches people come by as they're talking and grabbing cookies. And people even enjoy them, even talk about how good the cookies are. But nobody acknowledges Mrs. Jones. So now she's really upset. Nobody even acknowledged her, what she did. So next week comes around and she bakes them herself. And she makes sure that she gets them out of the oven in time so that when she shows up, they will still be steamy, hot, and warm. And people show up and they go, oh my God, look at these homemade cookies. Oh my God. And then everybody's talking and nobody acknowledges Mrs. Jones. Nobody even asks who brought the homemade cookies. They all eat them and leave. And as the meeting is finishing up, she can't keep silent anymore. And she says, I just want you to know that I've been giving cookies to this meeting for weeks now. And I don't ask for much. I just want a little acknowledgement for what I do. So whenever somebody says, I don't ask for much, it means that every time they give, they are asking for everything. That every time they do something, they want to be acknowledged. They want to not, everybody likes to be acknowledged for what they do. That's normal. But the need to be seen because their worth is completely tied up in what they do for others. And if you don't see what they're doing and don't acknowledge to them, oh my God, thank you so much for what you do, then they have no worth, which makes them furious. It makes them angry. It makes them feel sad and unloved and unseen. And yet they can't stop. They're addicted. So wherever they go, they give themselves to everybody, hoping that somebody will acknowledge them. But they walk around as though, no, I do this unconditionally. I'm full of unconditional love, which makes people go, oh, okay, well then I won't throw praise at you because you enjoy doing it. So I enjoy doing stuff for others, for people all the time, and I never ask anything. You're doing the same. So this is codependence, and I have to say, the person who asked this, my sense was that if you have confusion about this, there's probably a good chance that there's some undiagnosed, unresolved codependence within you. And while I don't have enough information to say one way or another, wanting again to ask the question for other people's benefit, it's very codependent, because you're obviously asking because you want to know. It's not a good question for others, it's a good question for you, or you wouldn't have asked it. But it makes you feel better to say it's for other people. And all of the other things you mentioned are usually cover stories for people's deep need to be loved and seen and acknowledged. And these are usually happening on an unconscious level. They might not even be conscious of it. So another typical codependent response, if we're talking about the empath kind of codependent, is that they give and they give and they give, and then they finally will blow up. They'll have an angry blow up out of nowhere. And people will be like, what the hell was that all about? And they will get, like the instance with Mrs. Jones who's bringing the cookies. And after, weeks and weeks and weeks of nobody acknowledging her cookies, she blows up in a way, she acts as though somebody, killed her cat. When all that happened is nobody said thank you for the cookies. It's just out of balance. This is very common. Codependent people will oftentimes be passive aggressive. And oftentimes very controlling. So they'll give unsolicited advice. You know how I feel about that. That's a very codependent thing to do. So that's the question. You can figure it out for yourself. Do we live in a chronically codependent world? I would say yes, because we have narcissists running the world who treat us all like objects. And there are people out there who spend all their time trying to take care of others and make others, meeting other people's needs in order to feel that's the only way they can get worth. And the sad part is both of them can't receive love. A narcissist can't receive true love, and an empath can't receive true love. And that's the sad part. And that's the one thing that will really heal, to receive true unconditional love and to be able to give it. So there we go. That's my answer to your question. My apologies if I responded in a way that made you feel bad. I hope not. But I honestly don't have enough info. I was trying to get more info on you to see if this was about you or if you really just were curious. So take it for what it is, and if it's helpful to you, I hope it is. But anyway, that's it for me in this edition of Answering Your Questions. And I love your questions. I'm going to always be honest with you. Again, a good thing, if you have a question, it's always good to share with me the emotional reasons why you're asking. I ask this question because in my life, that gives me something I can really focus my answer to you in a way that's most helpful to you. Otherwise, I'm just digging around with a poker trying to, okay, there's something in here. I can tell there's something going on. So my apologies if I do or say anything that's hurtful to anybody. It's just me doing what I do. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Take care of yourselves, and see you next time.